Never seen a smile so big on my little old lady's face until I tell her I'm going fishing all weekend. Pack up all of my bacon, I make plans for 7:45, and I swing around, pick up my date for the weekend. Some reason she seems to please when I'm leaving. There's something I'm missing when I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing.
Yeah, baby.
Yes, sir. Good evening, CFN, and all those who are joining us. Like Barry, like Steve, like Lloyd, like Tony, like Corey, like Eve, like Richard, like Nick, like Erica, like Jeanette. Thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be an interesting evening. It is going to be full of some information you've probably never heard of. We're going to be talking about something that we didn't want to advertise. We just want to advertise it like it was any live. But unless you're not on social media, unless you don't follow any kind of tournament trail, and unless you just can't stand the negativity on social media that you have somehow averted your eyes, ears, and all other senses, something happened last Friday that has taken the fishing industry by storm. And in typical CFN tradition, regardless of the allegations, we do not mention names. We never will, even if they are proven to be guilty or even innocent for that matter. Names are never discussed. So we will be doing that tonight. We'll be honoring the rules of CFN and the CFN Fish Off, because what we have before us, unfortunately, is another example of how people can suck. And I say that only because allegedly something has happened, and the video itself is just too hard to avoid the obvious. I don't want to sensationalize this. This is not for views that we're talking about this. There is a reason. There's a method to the madness. So we're not going to talk a lot about the details of the incident, simply because, it's all in the midst of being investigated. It's all before those who are in a position to make a decision. We just want to discuss it. We want to hear your thoughts, because going forward, tournaments are going to have a hard time remaining legit. And in this case, it had nothing to do with the organizer. It had nothing to do with the tournament itself. It had nothing to do with the other anglers in the tournament. This simply had to do with one boat, one team. And unfortunately, it has left the industry with a very black eye, if you will. It's gone viral. Everybody has seen the video. So there's not much really more to discuss in regards to the details. Everything is sort of coming out. Every podcast that is out there is doing their rendition and their take on the events that led up to it. Some of the history that has been discussed about the anglers, a whole bunch of things. It's been given enough airtime as far as I'm concerned. What we want to do is discuss with you folks, the community, how we go forward, how we move forward. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One, in hopes that we can hear out everybody's opinions on how they like to see things change. because the current format, may not work. It may work. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not the best judge of that. But we're definitely going to weigh into what you folks think, as well as it has a double purpose for things that will arise going forward in the CFN fish off, how we deal with controversy. We've had our fair share leading up to today. So, I feel for this tournament organizer, and all of us judges and what have you at CFN that deal with the CFN fish off know firsthand what these folks are dealing with, and it's not fun. And I tip my hat to them. In fact, I applaud the tournament the tournament director on how he conducted himself, how he dealt with it. As I said, it's quite something. So we're going to do this for your benefit. I will do my best to moderate it, but we're going to bring the entire panel in. We're going to discuss the issues. We're going to discuss some of the details. But again, in true CFN fashion, we don't mention names. We don't mention anything. In fact, what I've done with some of the videos is I've left it somewhat grainy so that even the sponsors that you'll see, small snippets of don't show well. Because as I said, I'm sure they're doing damage control right now. I can't even begin to imagine what a leading sponsor of this team is feeling. It must rip them apart. Anyway, I've said enough. I want to hear from the panel. Yeah, Mitch, absolutely. Cheating is just not cool. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us. I will lead this off with a video that will lead into the giveaway. So all of you 28 people that are watching right now, stay tuned because you're going to have to do something for us, and it could win you a flash boost, one of these babies, courtesy of the Shaw family. Very generous Shaw family. And all you have to do, it's really simple. We're going to keep track of this. We're going to somehow calculate everyone that does this in the comments. But now we've got 30 of you watching. All you need to do in the comments is type hashtag Shimano_rules. If you can do that for us, your name will go on a wheel. We only need to see your name once. Your name will go on a wheel. So make sure you enter now, Tony. Make sure you enter now, Sarah. Make sure you enter now, Richard. All of you big names that usually are on the front center of the wheel. One of these bad boys, courtesy of the Shaw family. And all you have to do is type in Shimano rules. Now, if you want to see how these bad boys work, by all means, watch this video, and then we'll come back with the panel. Stay tuned.
What is Flash Boost? Shimano designed innovative Flash Boost technology. It keeps flashing, which attracts fish whether in a pause or while retrieving. The mirror plate, which is fixed by a spring inside the body, vibrates with the lure action to generate diffuse reflection. Even if you stop the lure action, the inner plate will move and continue to flash, giving the lure a sense of life and inviting a fish bite. This is Flash Boost.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are we doing tonight?
Good.
You guys? Jay's in the house. We've got Lawrence, Gunther, and of course the one and only, if he's back there tying, he got back there tying, Big Jim McLaughlin. So, Jay, I'm going to start with you. There has been a lot of information that has passed on, and I want to thank you for coming forward. I wanted to talk about it, and I basically just needed to know that somebody else out there wanted to talk about it as well. It can be a very touchy subject. It can be very controversial, hence the reason we didn't advertise it. I didn't want to draw people in here and it just become, a very negative experience. We wanted to talk about it in a positive light so that we could somehow look for change, look for direction going forward. Just try and make sure that tournament directors that are truly trying to do it for the right intentions don't get caught in the same situation as these unfortunate folks did on Friday. So if anybody hasn't seen it, I will play it now just so that everybody can understand what it is that we're talking about. of course, this is the video. It has gone absolutely viral. I think everybody and their mother who may not even understand fishing, like fishing, doesn't even know what a walleye is, knows that pulling weight out of a fish is a no-no, especially if it is a weighted tournament. So best bag wins. And unfortunately, as I said, this tournament director, who did a fantastic job, as we will discuss with some of the details, came up with 5 fish, 8 pounds of lead weight, a bunch of fillets that were stuffed inside these fish, including a pair of pliers of all things, that were left in these fish. But as I said, that is the video. Everybody has seen it. I don't think anybody who's on social media hasn't. Jay, I'll let you start there.
Sure. Well, I made a habit the last many months to kind of stay off social media because of a lot of negativity out there. And this past weekend, if anyone tried to go fishing this past weekend, it was windy. It was windy. And when it's windy, as bad as it was, you spend some time at home, watch some of my Blue Jays, go Jays. And I'm getting flooded with text messages from people who I know from all walks of life that aren't involved in fishing about this walleye tournament in Ohio. And the first message I got was from a buddy who's a local sports reporter who knows me well, or used to be a sports reporter. And TSN was showcasing this on their TikTok feed or their Instagram story, or both. It was on both. And I was like, wow. So I did some digging on it. And this is crazy. But I want to quote Brian Latimer. And if anyone knows Brian Latimer, Brian's a bass pro in the U.S., just a wonderful human being, Brian Latimer. Go follow him on Facebook. Great individual, good person, shares a lot of good content. I'm going to share a quote from Brian. And, we shared the cheaters more than we did the winners. Let's think about that for a minute. And, and I totally give Brian credit for sharing that quote, and I'm going to use it because these anglers that fish in these events take time away from their lives. They take time off work, time away from their spouses, from their kids to fish these events where it's a passionate sport. We've talked about that. Angling emotions run high, and hunting too. Any kind of sport like that that's passionate, that you're so passionate about, sort of like some rules don't apply, and because we're so emotionally tied to it. And this is one of those instances that really is kind of dragging our sport in the mud a little bit. And I think it's a good time tonight just to try and maybe talk about some of the positives out of this. And so I talked to Scotty and I suggested we do a panel tonight about, let's talk about tournaments. Let's talk about rules we have in place to avoid these things. And cheaters will cheat. They're going to do it. But there are a lot of ways that discourages them, and the rules that have been set up to do that. Even before the show, I mentioned, catch and release tournaments are great for the fish, right? It also reduces cheating for not stuffing fish with lead weights, for example. Now, there's been a couple comments I want to comment on, Scotty, in the chat about walleye tournaments. Walleye and catch and release tournaments is hard to do. They're not hardy like bass are. They're a lot more sensitive to handling. And so you don't see a lot of live release walleye tournaments. A lot of walleye tournaments are catch and keep, even to the point where if the limit is 5 walleye, you're only allowed 5 walleye. You have to decide at the side of the boat whether you're going to keep that fish or let it go. And this is practice on the professional walleye trail in a lot of their water bodies. And so it's very hard to do walleye tournaments. And maybe there's a consideration here for doing it by length. Length tournaments have becoming more popular. Not just for tournaments, but even Lawrence talked backstage before the show about IGFA records and the importance of length versus weight. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about. We could go a lot of different directions, but let's try and talk about some positives tonight.
So what we'll do then, Jim, is we'll talk to you first about what it looked like back in the day, but you touched on a little bit of it, Jay. And this is from, I think this is Big Water Fishing. their YouTube channel. I have it in the video, so please go over and give a like because we have used their video. I never got a reply back on whether we could, but what it is a snippet of an hour-long video that if you folks want to see and hear all the details, this is the video you want to go to. In fact, Jay will probably share the link in the comments. But I just wanted to take a snippet to show how disheartened an angler or a tournament organizer can be with the unfortunate onslaught of this situation. And the fact is, a big tip of the hat goes to the director of this tournament because he was able to determine that when a big fish came out of the bag and weighed a certain poundage, he was a red flag went up. And then suddenly when the 5 fish got weighed in and it was an astronomical 33 pounds, when he figured it was a nice bag that was in the mid-20s, again, a second flag went up and immediately was thinking on, the tips of his toes and figured out that he needed those fish to be isolated. He needed the anglers to be isolated because he wanted to do a more thorough investigation. But regardless of all that, listen to the tournament director. It is disheartening, and I really do feel for him when you listen to this.
And at that moment, it turned into from a fishing tournament to a mob scene. I mean, these anglers, these guys that pour their heart and souls and money to this were just pissed. And this is like really the only thing that I want to get across. This is not about money. Most of these guys have money. I mean, hell, all of them pull into the parking lot with a $200,000 boat and truck combo. They take time away from their wives. They take time away from their kids. They take vacation from their jobs. This is a competitive thing, like just like a manly, raw, I want to be the baddest dog out there. And at this point in time, those guys took all of that away from the other anglers, and these guys were pissed, and it showed. I mean, and I think maybe a minute or two went by and I'm like, listen, I need you to leave, and guys, nobody touch them, because I thought
you saved them a beatdown, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I would agree with whoever is the host. I don't know his name, and I apologize for Big Water Fishing. The video, that is the link. Thanks, Jay, for sharing that. If you want to hear the whole interview, it's actually quite something. Again, you'll get a renewed respect for tournament anglers, tournament directors, and what they have to go through and how they have to think on their feet. And as I said, big tip of the hat to the gentleman that was in this video, Jason, because he did exactly that.
I think what's cool about that video is that there's the host, but there's 2 tournament directors in that video from 2 competing series. But it's a good interview because you actually hear they're all on the same page, right? And I think that it's important that like let's be honest. Jim wearing blue, I'm wearing red. We all get off the same bus at the wrestling arena. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're all in this together, right? That's what happens. And so it really, this is a real black eye on the sport. But I don't even know if it's a black eye. I think that's too small. Like this, I've never seen something go this viral.
Well, great segue into Jim. Jim, have you ever, in all the years that you've been in the fishing industry and competed, been, a celebrity, been a guest host, done some of the things that you've done, you've emceed events. You ever seen anything like this go this viral?
No, and the only reason it's there is because of social media, though. Yeah. If it would have happened 20 years ago, nobody would know about it.
Right.
And that's the difference with social media. I looked at this different because I truly make my living in the fishing industry. And I'm probably the only person on this whole thing right here that does. It's what I do and what I've done for the last, 35, 45 years. And I talked to somebody else today that's done the same thing. You would know the name right away. And they basically said to me, you know what? I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to talk about it. All the money I won a couple of times, I won 85 grand one weekend. I won 75 another. I've won 30 and 40 a couple of times. There's been, things like that. It's all about the winning.
Yeah.
It's all about the winning.
Yeah.
That's what it is. At the time, I didn't, when I won my second classic, the biggest one, I was this far away. You've heard me tell the story about probably not going, and I got the Visa card in the mail that I filled out 10 months before the sportsman show, and the wife said, you may as well go.
Yeah.
You earned it, and I won, and here I am, 30 years later, 35 years later, still making my living in the fishing industry, and very, 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 very happy doing it. But I don't know, I also felt hurt that these guys do, this isn't a couple of cowboys in a canoe that you would say, oh, they were drunk and they cheated. These guys were doing it for real. Like they were, competing and then I started thinking, I can't imagine if their wives didn't know what was going on. I could not imagine if they have kids, those kids on the school bus this morning.
Yeah.
That could almost bring a tear to your eye.
Jim, I feel exactly the way you do, and it's exactly how I felt. Initially, I think I was angry and upset, like hurt, like is the best way to describe it. Because, at the end of the day, the rest of the industry is going to have to do damage control for these two individuals who allegedly did this. At the end of the day, we're all going to be painted with the same brush, and it's not fair. And, this is part and parcel to what it is that we're trying to do and achieve by having this segment tonight is that damage control. Because
you'll never stop cheating. You'll never stop it. That's just what society is. When I was having a chat with said person today, I said to him, well, he said, well, you really don't think they could do something to stop cheating? And I said no, because I said it doesn't make a difference. When you cheat, there's a punishment, and most guys are willing to accept the punishment. I mean, look at professional sports. It's against a lot of fight. What do? They fight. It's against a lot of spear somebody, knock them into the boards, and just about kill them. You get suspended for 10 or 20 or 30 games, but that's cheating.
Yeah,
it's cheating. You just do it, but they put a number on it, so to speak,
and
you go ahead and you pay your money and you take your chances, and that's what these guys do too.
And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to what we feel is the penalty. But my initial question, as soon as I heard about this, I thought, you know what, Jim, the one question I would want to ask you: cheating is something that has always existed, no matter what sport it is. In the fishing industry, you started here in Canada, or especially Ontario, I should say, when bass tournaments just sort of started, when tournaments themselves just started to start.
Oh yeah, absolute infancy.
Yeah. And I have to ask, when was the first time that you saw any kind of indication of cheating?
I saw a few things along the way. There was an incident in GM Pro Bass in Barrie years ago where these guys had fish in a basket and they were found, and they actually brought a biologist. And the biologist, they pulled up the cage. They removed the third dorsal fin spine on all the fish. Put them back in the cage. They had the guy do this, the biology guy. Put the fish in the cage, put them back down on the bottom. Well, Sunday afternoon, who shows up with the fish in the basket with the spines missing? And they told them, you got to let them weigh the fish in. You've got to let them weigh them in, because it's that kind of thing. Like they have to. There's that line for illegal stuff. And once they weigh the fish in, then they had something happened that they hadn't accepted the prize. There was some snag there. When I talked to you about the possession, that line of possession proving, well, the fish were gone from me for 5 minutes. How maybe they're not my fish, whatever, that type of stuff. But Mark said it right on the stage. Hey, folks, guess what? We just caught these guys cheating.
Wow.
So there's been a few other things. They used to have this big bass thing on the Ottawa River. Now, it wasn't a tournament. It's once again, it's the two guys drunk in a canoe with a case of beer. And the guy weighed the fish in, and all the fish that died, they used to fillet them and donate them to a couple of old folks' homes.
Yeah.
For a fish fry. And the guy's filleting the fish, and they're still frozen. They put the fish in the freezer in the springtime and pulled them out. Put these ones in the freezer for the tournament in August.
Now, roughly, Jim, how many years ago would that have been?
25, 30 years ago.
25, 30 years ago. Well, Lawrence, I got to talk to you about the details, but just before we get to that, something that I thought Jay and I are sort of, somewhat new in the industry in terms of sponsorship. But I do want to ask you, Jim, because you've been involved in this from day one. Can you imagine Shimano or any other sponsor if we were to have done this? Can you imagine the hurt and just utter defeated feeling they would have had knowing that their name was on a jersey?
Well, imagine if it was me.
Yeah.
39 years of my life
that
they've supported me and done stuff with me.
Yeah.
And hopefully will continue.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I pull a stunt like that. That's not just about, wow, get him out of here as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Like right down to the point of reading the line in the contract where it says there's something in there about anything I've received. Like if I was terminated, it has to be returned and whatever. There's some things, right down to that, it's like, wow, why do you think when I have people pull up beside me and I roll the window down and they yell, I wouldn't buy a Shimano reel for all the money in the world? And I look at them and I go like this.
Yeah.
I smile and I drive away. If I didn't have Shimano on the truck, if I was in Tammy's car, it might be a different thing. But,
so Ed McKenzie offered, yes, I didn't want to mention names, but thanks, Ed, for mentioning some of the sponsors that
nice, Ed.
on the jersey, and that they offered statements, as I'm sure everyone that was on that jersey had to. They're damage control. Like, how could you possibly know that this is going on? So now
there's no blame. There's no blame on the tournament directors.
No.
There's no blame on any of the sponsors. There's no blame on anybody but the people who took the lead and went down the fish's throat.
Amen.
The only people.
So speaking about that, Lawrence, let's discuss a few things about the details. What I did find really interesting is there has been a bit of a path, a bit of a journey that this team has been on, where the tournament director basically said, without a better way of explaining it, these guys knew they were being watched. Whether they had been caught doing something, I believe last year in a similar tournament around the same time of year, one of the anglers went through a polygraph and failed, and unfortunately weren't able to go home with the first place position. And that was a hotly contested issue. They had to do damage control, these anglers, because of the image that had been brought forth. So they had already gone into this tournament with a bit of an asterisk beside their team name. Whether they deserved it at that time or not, that's not for us to judge. But here we are a year later, and they bring a bag. And it's interesting, if you watch some of the videos, you can tell the audience doesn't believe any of it right from the get-go. Their big fish weighed more, or at least it looked like it weighed more than it actually was. And then when the bag went on the scale, holy jumping. This is when, as the tournament director says, the flags went up and said, okay, this is ridiculous. That's a mid 20-pound bag at best, but for it to read 33 pounds like it did, all of a sudden, he knew that he had to do something. And again, for thinking on his toes, he did that. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about the details, because I know with Bluefish Radio, you were probably going to be doing a segment on this. So I'm sure you've already done some investigative work yourself.
But I'd like to go back a little bit, Scotty, and talk about, and this was raised. What's the motivator here, right? And I have a friend of mine, good friend, for a number of years, 30 years. And she's a probation officer. She's a criminologist. And she understands, she's studied, why do people commit crimes. So let's just talk about some of these potential motivators that get people who fish tournaments to cheat. So is it about getting money because they have no money? And you heard the tournament organizer say, look, if they're all pulling in a boat with boats and trucks that you could sell them and buy a house with. So it's okay. It's not a money issue. Are they having money problems? Are they having, are they going to lose their homes? Are they having trouble feeding their fish? Have they lost their job? They're feeding their kids. Have they lost their jobs? Are there those types of money issues? No, because, there's easier ways to make money and steal money than in a fishing derby. So is it a revenge thing? Are they pissed off at the tournament organizers? Do they want to somehow take it down? Do they want to injure the people that deserve to win and take it away from them? Is it a revenge thing? Is it is it some sort of ideological thing? Are they against fishing? Do they just want to sully the sport of fishing and make it look horrible and give everyone a bad taste in their mouth so they turn their backs on it and they drive the sponsors away? Is it about destroying the sport? Is it about, if it's not about the greed and the money, is it about the fame? Is it about winning that trophy? If it's about winning the trophy, who wants to have a trophy on their shelf that they stole? Right? You could just go buy one. Why would you steal a trophy in a sense? So, it only is going to bring you pleasure if you actually earn that trophy. Otherwise, it's just, you just buy it. So then what is it? What causes these people to go out and commit these crimes, and time after time? Well, they've done studies on people that shoplift. And the majority of times when kids shoplift, they have enough money in their pockets to pay for the things they've stolen that day. They have enough money in their pockets to pay for the things they've stolen. So then is it a cry for help? Is it a cry for help? Is it just, or what I think, it's just the thrill of doing it. It's just the thrill, and it becomes like an addiction, and they can't stop it. They can't stop cheating because that's the sport. The fishing isn't the sport. It's the cheating that's the sport. That's what gives them the real thrill. And I think that's what we're dealing with people who cheat in tournaments. It's they're on a totally different wavelength in terms of the competition. They're in the competing not to get caught, to pull it off, and not to get caught doing it. And then every time they raise the odds a little bit, they shove a little bit more lead into that fish's belly and see what they can get away with.
Yeah, and I think that is what was talked about at some point too, that unfortunately, if they had only put maybe one weight in the fish and one fillet, that perhaps we're not having this discussion. And that's unfortunate because, at the end of the day, then, the general public, people who know nothing about fishing, nothing about tournaments, nothing about a friggin' walleye, they probably still call it a pickerel if they had their choice. Look at it and say, how many other fish were weighed in that had weights in them as well? And that's the unfortunate thing is, of course, that is the assumption that people will make that maybe don't understand, or maybe they do understand, but perception is reality. And unfortunately, if these two anglers are perceived as cheating and have been found as cheating, then it's safe to assume that all anglers are cheating, and that's not right.
It's not, though. There's just a bad apple in every barrel. That's why I think all tournament directors would probably admit that there's probably someone cheating at some point during every event. At somehow they're bending a rule, they're not complying with the spirit of the rule. They're somehow just tweaking it to the point where they're not getting caught. But if you really looked at it, you say, look, you might not have broke the letter of the law, but you're really breaking the spirit of the competition. So get out of here. 100%. I think that happens every time. But I think, is that enough to stop the tournament? No, I think what they're doing, a lot of tournaments in the South in the United States, they're doing lie detector tests, right? Polygraphs of every winner. Anyone who cuts a check has to do a polygraph, and it's a deterrent. It's just a deterrent. It's to say, look, not many people can beat a polygraph test, and you're going to have to do it if you get a check from this competition. So it's a deterrent. It's just a way to say, look, go somewhere else. Go try your luck somewhere else, because if you try here, you're going to get caught. There's a very high risk of you getting caught.
Yeah. And for all those who haven't seen the video, Scott, you were asking how did they get caught. I'll bring Jay in and we'll discuss that. As we mentioned, kudos to this tournament director, because right away when the big fish was weighed in, he knew something wasn't right. And then upon the entire bag being weighed, he definitely knew something wasn't right because of the weight that this bag was holding. It looked very similar to that of a lot of other anglers who, basically submitted fish. So he set them aside, and upon examination that he did himself, he felt the fish. They were all dead, because that is another issue in regards to this tournament. How do you get away from this and going forward? Because all the fish usually that are submitted are dead because they're caught at depths that won't allow them to be necessarily released. So yeah, he felt them. The meat was punky, mushy, and right away could feel something very rigid inside the belly of one of the walleyes, and he immediately asked for a knife, cut the fish open, and was presented this mess. But yeah, unreal. So Jay, again, talking about some of the situations that you've been involved with. I know you've had your fair share of tournaments. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, but I've been consulted on lots of questionable activity before. Like, there's been reports of, even in the last few years, cages being brought in, cages being found. And there's been discussions about and Jim talked about this, where we talk about this sort of chain of evidence, and if you find a cage, what should you do? We'll talk about bass tournaments specifically. A lot of times cages are found. It's almost known to the general tournament group who the likely culprit was, but a lot of times they can't be charged because the chain of evidence has been compromised. That's the issue. I think what should happen is, I think that tournament officials out there should have basically a little black box that if something happens like this, what do we do in the heat of the moment when we're charged right up? What do we do? And even the tournament director, Jason, from the Lake Erie Walleye Trail, he even admitted in that interview, he wished he wouldn't have reacted as harshly as he did. He wished he was a little more level-headed about it. But I feel for him, and we all do. We all feel for him. But when you're in a position like that, I'm not blaming him at all. But I think, hindsight being 2020, I think that it's important that all tournament officials have a plan, that if something happens like that, what do we do? How do we react? What are our steps? And maybe this will be a wake-up call for some of the tournament organizers out there. Recently I've been getting more and more involved in the kayak fishing world because of Trevor buying a kayak 2 years ago, and I bought one this year to spend more time with him. And I've been doing some reading on it, and the kayak fishing world was rampant with cheating for a while, modifying the measuring boards. There are stories of taking the boards and modifying them to make the fish seem longer, people trimming the tails of fish to fit slot limits. And the kayak fishing world has really done some great steps to control this. One is you can only use certain measuring boards now, and they cost money. The cheapest one being like $50 up to $100. You have to use certain measuring boards, and at some of the higher level events, you bring your measuring board to the pre-tournament meeting to have it checked to make sure it is the official board. You can't use any other board. And I know that these kind of things cost money, but in the end, this is how we kind of control cheating. But a couple of the comments in the chat, Scotty, just comes right down to greed. Yep. It's straight up greed. It's not about impressing your sponsors. Sponsorships now with companies, they're not looking for, they're happy if you win tournaments. They really, truly are. And it might give you a little bit of an advantage over some. But in the end, unless you're fishing at, for the Bassmaster Elites or the MLF Pro Tour, or maybe the Professional Walleye Trail, this is just a big weekend tournament series out of Ohio. Yes, they have big prize money, no doubt about it. But in the end, sponsors aren't looking for winners. Their winners are people who get out and promote their brands and promote their products and are positive, and that's the new realm of things. To say they have, there's been some people say that sponsorship puts pressure on anglers. They're putting pressure on themselves. The fishing world is about promoting angling and promoting, they don't want to promote this, right? Yeah. That's not about it. It just comes right down to greed. It's awful.
So as we touched about, and I think this question pretty much sums up where we're going forward with it, based on what we've seen here and in the past, do you see, Jay, any changes that could be made? And if so, what would you assume they will be to rectify this situation?
I think in catch and kill tournaments, when you are, so in the walleye situation, so the team in question never handed in their fish to be eaten. That was one of the rumors out there. Most fish in these formats that are dead, the fish is not wasted. It's donated. The fish are filleted and donated to local groups. Could be a senior's home, could be a food kitchen. And it's rumored that some of these fish that from this team wasn't usually donated. I think all the fish should be donated. Like some of these rules, if you're going to, the fish should not be wasted, right? First and foremost, if you're going to kill fish, you're within your limit to kill fish, right? You're following the rules and regulations of the state or province that you're in. Those fish should be donated. And by cutting those fish open, it gives you some quality control in this, right? It's because we have live release tournaments, which the fish have to be released alive, and the chance of filling a fish with lead or any kind of weight and keeping it alive is very, very, very low. Okay. Yeah. When it comes to kill tournaments, that's fine. I think as long as you're within your regulations, but those fish should be checked. If not all of them, at least the winners, go down the top 5 and cut their bellies open. The fish are already expired already. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm surprised that hasn't happened more often, as I've been exposed to a lot of these rules and regulations over the past little while. I think that lengths is harder to cheat than weights. I believe that, and I know that a 20-inch bass or a 20-inch walleye, you name the species, there's variability in the weight of that fish. I fully appreciate that. I have a running joke that I've caught so many 30-inch class channel catfish that have weighed anywhere from 12 pounds to 17 pounds. And we're talking a fish of a couple of inches difference.
Yeah.
But when it comes to legal enforcement for tournament directors, length is length. And you can control that by having your board certified and a sticker on your board. You have to have an identifier. We've talked about this with CFN. There's even some kayak events that are going to go to video release, Scotty. They're talking about this because they have to try and control, because as Lawrence said, people will find a way. This has nothing to do with this past event, and it's not a cheating story, but it's a scandal around tournament fishing. And I posted it, and I'm sure you guys have heard about it. If you haven't, check it out. Keith Poche just won the Red River Open for a BASS, and he was fishing backwater areas, and he was within his legal rights, and he explains what he was doing, but some anglers felt what he was doing wasn't right, and they tried to block off where he was accessing some of these shallow backwaters. And it's a really cool story. If anyone has ever worked a push pole in a boat and knows how hard it is, Jim, I'm sure you've pushed a few poles in your life.
In the old days, yep.
Yep. And it's hard.
If you used the electric motor too much before noon, you had to paddle for the afternoon or move around the big fish, right? Because the batteries were no good. The power draw was so high. It's what you had to do. Rocky was great with a pro pole, although he was smaller than me.
That's hilarious. Now, Jim, I gotta ask you. You've grown up with the whole weight, 5-bag limit. Weigh in your fish. I know there's probably going to be an appetite to go further towards the MLF platform of how they do live videos on the boats, and
but that's only going to be at the very top echelon.
And this is the thing, because it gets expensive if we start doing it down in the lower ranks. So could you see a benefit of these tournaments maybe going to a length, or do you feel that the weight should always be?
Well, I come from the old school, so I'm always going to be stuck on weight, eh?
Yeah.
It's what it was. It was about catching the biggest fish. Hopefully, you get some of those big fish that were over 20 inches and absolute porkers, because it added the weight just adds up faster, right?
Yeah.
But let's face it. 2 years from now, this is history. It's gone. Nothing's going to change. Yeah. And then 3 years from now, they'll catch somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And that's-
nothing's going to change. It's been like this forever. There's guys get caught. I just saw somebody mention something there about an ice derby. I didn't get a chance to read it.
Yeah.
It might have been about cheating, but I'm not saying it was. I just saw something pop up, so I thought it might have been. Yeah,
no, it's an interesting idea that Tony presents in regards to a tournament or an ice fishing derby that goes on. I like that idea, especially when it's going to a purpose. I know Matagami, they do that pike tournament, and it goes to the elders, it goes to the community. Not one fish is wasted. They share it with the elders in the community. They share it with anybody who's down on their luck and needs a good meal. So all the pike that are caught in that tournament are used and not wasted. So,
but on the lighter side, these guys put 8 pounds of weight, over 8 pounds.
Yeah,
because apparently there was 8 pounds of lead, a pair of pliers, and a bunch of fish.
Yeah,
that's greed. That's so much greed. I can't believe they put that much
greed. It's just they just want to cheat and see what they can get away with.
I've designed this,
but I read those numbers and I'm like, oh my god, that's so greedy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I designed this just while sitting here, okay? And if you the way every once in a while you have a walleye swallow a jig and it ain't coming out.
Yeah.
Whether you let the fish go or you take it home. So what you do is you get yourself some 16-ounce jigs like this, and you drop that down the walleye's throat. And you say, "Oh no, he ate my jig."
Well,
it's just that.
My giant saltwater shark jig.
Yeah, this is a 16-ounce head, Lawrence, with about
love it
10 or 12 odd hook on it. Nice little twister tail. That's one of Jamie's grubs there from.
Just don't drop it down head first.
No.
It's got to go tail first.
And of course,
I'll put this over here.
And it's nice to see that there is a bit of a lighter side because it has to be.
But Jim's right. This goes on forever, and
you're right, Lawrence. And the animosity and anger that it brings out to people.
It's like murder with humans.
Oh,
You're not allowed to kill people, but
burn the bitch.
Yeah, but A-Rod is saying, Jim, don't give them any ideas.
Scotty, I was looking back, and the IGFA, they can't prove it, but there's been, all those muskie records that still stand to this day that were set in the 1930s and 40s, right? Everyone knows now. There's no way you can have a muskie of that length weigh that much. And there was an actual case of a muskie in I think it was New York State, caught in the St. Lawrence River on the New York State. So it's a New York State record, caught in 1948. And the organizers of they got together and they hired some scientists to go and do a look at this and look at all the pictures and do analysis. And they said this fish was overinflated by 10 pounds. It should be 58 pounds, not 68 pounds. And they said there's no way a fish that length can weigh that much. Scientifically, it's impossible. But how do you, without proof, how do you dismiss that record? So the IGFA, the International Game Fish Association, is saying now for muskellunge, it's no longer about weight. That fish has to be measured by length from the tip of its nose to the fork of its tail. Pictures have to be taken. The leader and lure have to be saved. There has to be documentation carried out. It has to be measured on a standard IGFA measuring board. It has to be witnessed, and then it has 60 days have to go by before that record is declared to make sure anyone has any problems or questions about the legitimacy. And then only then, and the fish has to be returned alive, so it can't, only then will it be declared a record. They have not yet. For muskie, IGFA is doing this for over 100 different species now, catch and release records. They're moving in that direction. I tell you who's not moving in that direction, though, is the Great Canadian Salmon Derby. They dissect their fish. Any fish that's going to win a check gets dissected. They used to x-ray them, but now they realize, people put sand in and other things. So now they take them apart and they look inside. They found rocks, nuts, bolts, sand, gravel, lead, you name it. They found it in the fish, and people just want to cheat because it's by the weight. When the salmon derbies, it's by the weight. You do not win a salmon check on a salmon derby without that fish being turned inside out first.
Yeah. And thanks so much for jumping in there, Tony. Yes, Jeanette. It's kind of a tradition here at CFN. We don't like to mention the names, especially with the investigation still very raw. Charges are probably, I would assume, still pending. There's still some investigations that still need to be had. People need to follow, as Jay and Jim and Lawrence have mentioned. Did they follow the proper protocol? Were they always in touch with their fish? Did they lose possession of those fish at any time? There's a whole bunch of things that have to be considered before you can lay claim to any of this. But as I said, they got escorted out by police because they were fearful of their well-being. I can totally understand that. You can hear in the anger. We couldn't share any of the audio with the live presentation tonight, simply because we try to keep this a family show and try to keep this up and up.
Did you see on the part of the video when they're sitting with the cops on the curb?
No.
And there's a lady officer, and she's looking at them and she's talking to them, and the look on her face, I almost felt like, she didn't come to work today. She came to work thinking she was going to catch a bad guy robbing a bank or somebody or something, doing something you really shouldn't be doing. But cheating in a fishing tournament, and these two guys are sitting like drowned rats on the side of at the edge of the curb in the park, and they're looking at them and they're talking, and they are stone cold. I think they were in shock. They couldn't believe they had been caught. But the look on that lady officer's face, I just felt for her.
Yeah. Like
she was in disbelief,
Yeah.
Like they didn't tell me about this when I went to police school.
Yeah.
Giant children.
It obviously turned in. It was a situation where a tournament turned into a flash mob scene in the with one weight being exposed. They didn't even have to cut open the rest of the fish.
Yeah.
They just did so for the sake of making sure that they did a thorough investigation. But really, once the first weight came out of the fish, it was over. Like there's no stopping that kind of anger.
So Scotty, I was going to mention two stories I read about over the weekend, and one I'd read before and one I hadn't. So the short version of the one I read is ice fishing for sturgeon or spearing sturgeon. There was a cheating story where there was the anglers were allowed to be in one part of a lake, and they paid for this event. They had to be in teams, but the cheaters who got caught set up another hut in another part of the lake where they weren't supposed to be, and tried hiding the hut with a white sheet over a snowy lake.
Oh no!
And they were caught. Which I'm like, I've never, like, even in the sturgeon world. But let me talk about a really cool story when it comes to cheaters. And Wired to Fish featured this story a while ago, and I followed up on it yesterday again. This is where science gets involved. We talk about, are these fish even real? Like, these fish look so heavy compared to the average fish. There was a tournament in the U.S. where a team weighed in a bunch of fish to win, and the fish looked really oddly shaped for that particular lake. And as the story goes, the anglers were caught or observed catching fish from a nearby lake where the bass were in better physical condition, and they were transferring the fish to the other lake. How do you prove this? They actually got scientists involved, and they took the otoliths from the fish from the event, and they used what's called radioisotopes. So in biology and fish ecology, we use isotopes quite a bit to help us to assess fish. Now, this is straight up lab work, so I'm not an isotope guy, but the way it works is we can take a fish, take muscle tissue from fish, take an otolith from a fish, and I can tell you what that fish has been eating in that body of water using like the amount of carbon or the amount of nitrogen in its bones, basically. And so in a certain lake, let's say yellow perch have a certain chemical signature and shad have a certain chemical signature. I take the bass, I check the isotope levels in the bass bones, and I'm like, oh yeah, this fish is mostly eating yellow perch. So back to the story, they were able to look at this lake. The water in this lake had a certain isotope signature from the tournament lake. And they were able to prove, basically using elaborate forensics, as they called it, but fish ecology, fish biology, to show, yeah, those fish came from this lake. They did not come from the tournament lake. That's how they were caught, using fish forensics. That's really cool story. I put a link in the comments. I recommend people reading it. It's really cool.
We're going to go back to that and find that. Interesting you mentioned that. So there's the link there. I also heard an interesting story that, I think Steve in the bottom here said something about some criminals aren't very bright. Well, this individual down in the States, this is, you talk about reading the rules. letter to letter, cover to cover, and finding the fine print. This gentleman in this tournament was able to determine that if he were to put a basket underneath the dock and hold fish in possession for a couple days, which means they haven't eaten and they are now crowded, that kind of situation will create a feeding frenzy because they're all competitive, right? And let's face it, when fish are hungry, they're extremely competitive. So he would go to this dock, he would flip his jig to that dock, and of course these fish would see this in the basket and they just one after another. So he was catching the fish out of the basket. He went back to the same dock day after day during the tournament, and was still catching fish out of this basket, doing exactly what he had been doing. Anyway, they found these 3 baskets underneath the dock that he was flipping to, that he had caught these fish, who knows, weeks before or days before, doesn't matter. And they said, you cheated. This is cheating. And the guy that was with him, his partner, was taken under oath and said, what did you see? What did you witness? And he said he flipped to the basket. The fish would bite. He reeled it in and he would put it in the live well. And they were all live. So when they read through the rules, they found that what he did isn't against any of the rules that they have listed. That catching any fish out of a foreign basket or any other container isn't illegal. That it just says fish caught from the lake. Yeah, and he ended up winning.
Scotty, it's
there's a lot of guys in the States, you'll go by big docks on the big reservoirs, and they have fish baskets where they catch a few fish in the evening or at night with the lights. They throw them in the basket, and then they have fish fry the next night. But most of them have lids.
But Scotty, what you're saying isn't that much different, and it's happened to people. I've seen it happen to me. I've stumbled into this myself. You go to a lake for a bass fishing tournament, you fish. All of a sudden, you stumble into a bunch of fish, a good-sized fish. You think, wow, I hit the mother load. Then you find out the weekend before there was a tournament, and they released their fish in that basic area. So now you just caught the same fish that were caught a week before, concentrated large fish in a small bay near a launch, that were never distributed back into the lake properly after the tournament was over. They were just released after the weigh-in and set free, and they just went to the first place to catch their breath and put on a few pounds. And so there's not much difference, right? And then there's people that actually seek out those spots. They know there was a tournament, they know where those fish were released, they were maybe part of that tournament the week before, and they go back to that spot and they fish that spot. So there's 100 ways to bend the rules. So I ask you guys, you can make the rules really long. And Jason, I've been at the OBN tournaments, the regional tournaments where they read the rules, man. It's an hour and a half, 2-hour process of reading the rules. And so you can make the rules to try to catch people, or you can put deterrents to stop people from trying. And I'm in a lot of clubs, like our Muskie tournament the other day. We give it a little trophy for the biggest fish, no big deal. But we have draws afterwards for good prizes. And we have, so we don't really go like best fish. It's not that big important. Catch, photograph, release, whatever. Not a big deal if no one witnesses it. And we don't really care if you measure it that closely. It's all not that important. Important is everyone comes out, has a good time. Our walleye, catch, photograph, release. If we try to get people not to fish in super deep water, but when you're doing catch, photograph, release, you can fish wherever you want. You can fish down 75 feet if you see them down there and catch them. It's not ethical, but people will do it. Do we punish them? So, you try to you can get around these rules 100 million different ways all the time. But if you put in deterrents, I think that's the way to go. And I think polygraph is one way. And I think just having more random prize orienting, or maybe, I don't know, Big Jim. I mean, do you think it's always going to be like that? Like we're always going to have huge bags of money, and then you have to put that spotter on the boat with that tournament.
But that's only going to happen where the entry fee is $10,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was going to be a great segue, by the way, Lawrence. That was a great segue. And yes, so Jim, my question to you going forward, based on where we've come from to where we are now, we know it exists. We know people are cheating. Now we have to, as an industry and as a community, do extreme damage control to make sure that people don't assume that all anglers are cheating in tournaments. So going forward, do we put spotters on the boat? Do we create every tournament length based?
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. It's too. Where are you going to get? They can't even get enough people for tournaments now. Big tournaments. Mark. There's people that aren't there. It's like I said earlier. It's cheating. You're caught. It's what it is. We move on to the next. It's like getting a speeding ticket on a 401. Oh, $120, and then 10 miles down the road they get you for $220.
Yeah.
It's people. It's what they do. It's a horrible thing. I got to go back to Lawrence mentioning about the fish being released. Years ago, one day we got the Shimano catch and release boat, and the guy that was driving it says to me, he says, "You want to go for a ride?" I said, "Yeah, what's up?" He says, "We got the boat." He says, "We're going to let the fish go." I said, so I went to Paul Shimano and said, "Is there somewhere you want us to dump the fish? Like I know where they should go, but is there somewhere you had in mind?" And it was out of Reno Ferry, and he said, "Any weed bed past Ferguson Island that gets them away from the area and whatever else." So I said, "Okay." So we're going along. And I says to Brent, I says, "Hey, I know there's a great big weed bed right behind this island here, the first island past Ferguson. I forget the name. It's a small one. Big milfoil bed. I've caught some big fish out of it. It's a healthy spot, big flat in the back, so there's lots of place for these fish to go do their thing." So we pull up on the weed bed and we drop. I think it was like 140 fish, and anywhere from like probably 2 pounds to 5.5.
Wow.
All healthy, beautiful. Like the door opened, boom, they went out. And it was like they were gone. We waited around for about 10 minutes, no floaters, nothing, all good. About 10 days later, I'm out fishing there on a Saturday. Maybe a week. Yeah, maybe it was a full 2 weeks because it was a tournament the weekend after too. We're coming back. It was a horrible day. I went on the big. I think I caught like 8 fish. I was ready to split my wrists, and we're coming back down. The wind starts dying down because the wind just howled all day. It's in the evening, and I thought, "Oh, I know where I'm going." And the guy I'm with goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "We're going to go see if there's any fish left in this weed bed." He said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because there's usually half a dozen that you can catch on any given day." But I said, "We put I think it was close to 140 in it a couple of weekends ago on Sunday." And he says to me, "Oh, let's go." So we went. We never got a bite, period. Not a bite, period. Fish go on 25 minutes. Nothing. So they're gone.
One other thing that was
not breaking the rules doing it. You're not breaking the rules doing it.
No, and one other thing that was talked about too that we touched on earlier was the fact that these folks did have a bit of an asterisk beside their name. They were being watched based on what some people in the industry would suggest, just based on how they conducted themselves leading up to this. But like always, and I tip my hat to these tournaments. There is the honor system, and I think when it comes to fishing, we try and use the honor system as much as we possibly can, because we don't inherently think that people are out there to cheat. However, in this situation, they were caught. They're going to pay a penalty, whatever that penalty is, and hopefully going forward, we will be able to come up with a remedy for these larger showcase money-winning tournaments. But when it comes to these small club tournaments, the CFN fish-off, where the honor system is paramount, it'd be great to instill all these rules. But then it becomes, in my opinion, overkill. It gets away from the event. You're not holding a tournament. You're holding, I don't even know what you would call it, but are you following the rules? It's not what fish you catch. It's did you follow the rules? And
you're just challenging the cheats.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lawrence.
You're just challenging the cheats. You're attracting the cheats because they think, man, there's a real competition there. Look at all those rules. We'll figure a way around that. And I think the small tournaments, though, where it is more on your honor, where you're fishing with a buddy that you always fish with, so you guys can cheat together and you're going to cover each other's back, whatever. I think that's where it hurts the most. And I hear about tournaments where this young fella, and it was these single one man, one boat kind of thing. And he had a tinny. No one really knew this guy. He had a tiller tinny. Everyone else was whipping around bass boats. He won 3 tournaments in 3 out of 4 tournaments. And then they finally caught him cheating. And he was a hero to zero. A hero to. And I know another guy, another local tournament, another guy, a hot shot, big mouth, real braggart, like real strut walk, and and he would brag about how he would bend the rules all the time, and they just drove everyone nuts. Everyone just hated him, but he kept showing up. And then finally, the executive said, "That's it. You're out of here. We can't catch you, but you just keep bending the rules. You're off." He tried suing the organizers of this very prestigious bass tournament series. He threatened to sue them. He was on their asses for 2 years, just making their lives miserable. So, you got to support your executive. You got to rally around the executive, and you can't let them hang out and dry when you're dealing with these maniacal people who just want to bend the rules. And that's really their joy of life, is just being a-holes.
Okay, so on that note, I will ask I'll ask all of you. And this person put up the question, when it comes to future tournaments, I don't think that these folks will involve themselves, enter, or have anything to do with anything that has fishing related.
They're done.
Again, they're done.
They'll find something else to cheat at. They will. They'll find something else to cheat at.
If you are caught, you're right. You're 100% right, Lawrence. If you are caught, if you're someone else and you're caught cheating in an event, should you be banned from all other tournaments? Jim, we'll start with you.
1,000%.
Okay.
1,000%. Boom, done. But where's the legalities there?
Yeah.
You say you can't fish. What do you mean I can't fish? I got caught. I didn't cheat like in your tournaments. That kind of stuff, and that's where they get into trouble.
Yeah.
The tournament organizers. The tournament organizers have to put it into their constitutions for the organization that the directors have the right to kick someone out. Yeah. They have the right, and everyone has to support that.
Jay, what's your thoughts?
So, I think it should be exactly what was just said from both Jim and from Lawrence. So, number one, they shouldn't fish, but the organizers need to have it in their rules that they can select who can fish their tournaments. Like, that it has to be done that way, because if you don't have that and someone tries to come in and you try to ban them because they've done nothing to your tournament series, but full well they've caused crap down the road, okay, or down the lake.
Yeah.
I think you need something in your rules that you can stand on to say, no, we control who we allow in these events. I think in practice, it makes sense. You could just have who you want. Are the tournament rules legally binding? That's a discussion itself. But I do believe that the organizers need to have it in their rules that they can choose who fishes their event in the event that these things happen. Because cheaters aren't necessarily the ones who are caught, but there's just anglers out there who attract drama. Is that what I want to call it? Drama? Yeah. Like, there are anglers out there who just attract this kind of behavior, and you just don't want a good tournament organizer does not want any part of that. It's not worth one entry fee. It's not. At the end of the day, it's not, because the average person who is supporting these events are the ones paying for the events. Let's be honest with that. Like, the donators. I'm a donator on a regular basis. Okay.
Most of us are, Jason.
I don't have nearly enough time to spend on the water to be successful in fish tournaments. Why do I do it? I enjoy the competition, enjoy the camaraderie of it. But you have to keep the donators happy. And I'm not putting donators down, because I am one. I'll stand up and say it. Okay. But at the end of the day, you got to keep your sort of clients happy, right? So there should be something in the rules to say we can control who fishes these events. And I'm sure there's examples out there of that some organizers could copy and paste into their tournament rules.
Yeah. Ed McKenzie brings up a great point. Cancel all open tournaments and make them invite only. Interesting.
Never happened.
No.
Yeah.
It's you're not inviting thieves.
Yeah.
A lot of the open tournaments that we have down here are like our pike tournaments. We have spring and fall pike tournaments. We have a couple of other open bass tournaments. They're really for the local anglers. Mm-hmm. It's father, sons, mothers, daughters, husband, wife, whatever combination you want. A lot of the teams are of that makeup, and they show up and enter the day of because they have other things going on in their life, right? So I agree, Ed. I know you're coming from with that. I do really appreciate where you're coming from, but in practice that wouldn't work for a lot of, because most tournaments are opens, and in fact I can't think of, other than the tournaments you have to qualify for, like at the higher levels, 99% of tournaments we're talking about are open tournaments. I
agree. There's a few clubs where you have to have someone recommend you to join the club, and then there's maybe a probation period of 60 days or 90 days or 2 meetings or something, and then they vote you in or out. And I think that's not unconstitutional. You don't have a guaranteed right to go into a club and join a club. It's like you have a right to go into a store, in a fish store, go in and buy something in the store until they don't want you on their property anymore, and then you're not allowed in anymore, right? And the same with the club; they should have that right too. Open tournaments are a little trickier, but people know people at the local level. People know people, and you got to be able to say, hey, you know what? No, we don't want your business.
I call that the water buffalo rule. If you remember the Flintstones, the water buffalo. Okay, I'm gonna date myself, but I've been in clubs where I know anglers from all over Ontario, and you see a guy walk in the club, and you're just like, oh god, here we go. Here it comes. Like it's this person is coming into that club.
Bad smell.
Because they've been removed from another club. Yeah. And they bring issues with them. I hate to say that. I hate to be dramatic. Fishing's not supposed to be dramatic, but I've lived this myself.
But Jason, it's exactly that. Exactly that. Like, who wants to be a member of a club when you got one person just making it miserable for everybody? Yeah. And whether they're cheating or just being totally annoying, at some point you got to get rid of that, or your club is just going to go downhill and the people just leave.
Well, that's what happened. As Ed mentioned, there were guys caught in the Quinte Kiwanis Walleye Derby, which was a huge event every year. A few years back, and now that tournament is gone.
It'll be back, though.
So unfortunate. Yeah,
it's gone because of COVID.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah,
but there's so many ways to cheat. You just have to deal with it. Like Jim says, you hand out the tickets, you're banned, you lose your driver's license for a year, for life, whatever it is. Get out of here. It's not. You don't have to hang them. You don't have to cook them. You don't have to stone them to death. They're just bad apples.
The only person who can take your license away is a judge. Mm-hmm. You have to go to court, be convicted, and the judge say, because you'll hear about that sometimes. Guys, you seem to hear about it a little more with hunting, because when they do a hunting thing, it seems to be somehow really heinous. I don't know what it is about it. It really seems to draw the ire, because they go in, they shoot a moose out of season, blatantly do it, and obviously get reported. The moose comes out, they take the truck, they take everything, goes to court, and then you lose your right. You hear about it in Toronto sometimes with the salmon stuff. Guys, forfeit their equipment, and that's when you remember when the MNR used to have the big auction? I don't even know if they do that anymore.
I lost an ice hut there. They sold my ice hut.
So what did they get busted for? Narwhal.
I just built the ice hut. I pull it on the ice. I had no idea what to expect. My first ice hut, my beautiful brand new ice hut. I go up the next weekend. It's frozen in 2 feet of ice. The lake flooded on top. The thing frozen, and then there's a sticker on it that says, "You need to put a license on this ice hut." I'm thinking, put a license on that ice hut. I'll never get this ice hut off the ice. It's finished.
Break out the marshmallows.
Oh my God. So before we go, I got to show you. You all know that I have a monster hole in my heart because we're springerless. So we were going to get a puppy, but Tammy and I aren't in the mood right now to be chasing a puppy around.
Yeah.
So this is the new one.
Oh.
Hang on. She comes home Wednesday.
Awesome.
What is it?
Awesome, man.
It's a Springer.
It's another Springer from Springdale Springers. She's a beauty. She was one of Frank's breeding dogs, and Frank's health has come into question a bit recently, and he said he's going to wind it down a little bit at Springville, make it a lower key, and he made me an offer I couldn't refuse on this dog instead of a puppy. I could not imagine me chasing a puppy around out here, but She's 3 years old. Her name is Tracy. So Tammy's already changed her name to Lacey.
Nice.
Because she's 3. Eh? She had pups back in the spring. So she's going to do that. And hopefully we're going to bring her home on Wednesday. And, like Frank said, we'll see what happens for a few weeks. And as long as she works out okay, I will have some ears to rub again.
Oh, awesome. Welcome Lacey to CFN.
What's that?
You gotta welcome Lacey to CFN. Official welcome.
Yay!
It's the mascot now.
I'll hold her up next week. She'll probably bite me. Last time we saw Big Jim, the dog was on his neck going on the pavement.
What happened to your ear?
Springers are pretty smart, Jim. They're a good judge of
That's
character.
not a cow's ear. It's mine. Anyways, Tammy wanted a cat. I was sort of backing up about a cat. Muskie season comes. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
But,
Jim wants to go. So listen, I want to thank the three of you for joining me like you did tonight. I do know that Jim has to get going, so we're going to wrap this up. It has been an hour, and I want to thank everybody that has tuned in. We've had just a fantastic discussion. I love the fact that the details came out, but the names didn't. What we will see going forward will be interesting. I know we will probably do a post to identify that, and it won't be right away. I know they're going to take their time because they want to get this right, but I do believe, and this is just my opinion, I know Jim has said that, a couple years down the road, this will all be forgotten. But I believe that going forward, every tournament organizer and every tournament board of directors is going to pay heed to the amount of reach that this event and this action has received, and that no one wants to be viral. Nobody wants to end up on Barstool and CNN and TSN and all these other news factions talking about this, because as we said, now all we do as anglers and a fishing community is damage control in the following days. But you got some insight on what happened today, what happened in the past with Jim, and of course what we can look forward to in the future with Lawrence. So thank you to you three gentlemen. You guys continue to come here every Monday and just pelt us with a whole bunch of information, and we thank you so much for your dedication.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, good, buddy. You know what is really cool is that three of us we're all completely different.
Yep.
In what we bring, and I think that's so it's not just three guys, talking about the same thing.
Amen.
It's all different stuff. Yeah.
100%.
I learn from you guys every day, man. Every day.
Amen. Amen.
Hey, I might come back out of tournament fishing if you decide to do ice fishing for narwhals. So like when they poke their horn up or whatever it's called, their narwhal up the hole, you grab them and get your fish.
Wrestle them. You wrestle them.
You measure the horn, and then you just shove them back down and let them go.
Oh, shit. All right. Well,
doodling narwhals.
Ideas that we've provided anglers on how to do certain things with their fish to get that edge. We'd like to give you an edge, and this flash boost, beautiful crankbait, twitch bait, whatever you want to call it. This has been offered up by the Shaw family, and all you have to do to enter to win is put this in the comments. Hashtag Shimano_rules. It has to look exactly like that to qualify. You must have the hashtag in it, and we will put all those who put that in the comments on a wheel, and we will draw it next week. Until then, I bid the three of you farewell. I can't wait to go fishing with you tomorrow, Jim. Weather looks fantastic, and we're gonna hook the wheels.
It won't show up, eh?
What is that, Jim? It's
a flash boost and a 6-pound smallmouth mouth halfway up right from the back.
Challenge accepted.
No, you can't put that on a Tokyo rig, though.
No, you're right. You're 100% right.
What time will you be here? Be here for about 11?
I will be there for 11. Absolutely. In the meantime, I can't think of anybody better to take us out than our beloved Dave Mercer. So, Dave, take it away. Everybody have yourselves a great week. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned till next Monday, where you might be the winner of a flash boost courtesy of Shimano and the Shaw family. Take it away, Dave.
Well, as much as I hate to admit it, I guess we've run out of time. So I've enjoyed it, but I'm going to do something I haven't done since season 1. Turn out the lights, the party's over. They say that all good things must end.